Hi there, my name is Shalene Drakes-Tell, and I'm the University of Toronto Scarborough Arts, Culture and Media Equity and Diversity in the Arts resident. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. Before we start, let us acknowledge the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. We also recognize each other. We recognize the strength of our ancestors and acknowledge their blood runs through our veins. That said, we want to acknowledge the contributions that our foreparents, our families, our community members have made to our society, whether we have come here by force or by choice. We are thankful to be here in this space together to lift each other up, to encourage one another, and to determine for ourselves the narrative of Blackness and the excellence using Nguzo Zaba principles to guide us. We commit to leaving our communities better than how we found them and to making our ancestors proud. So before we start this conversation, I want to say from jump, Black stories matter. So who are you? How do your lived experiences as Black people shape how you see the world and how the world sees you? If we look at the media and how they tell our stories, you would think we're one-dimensional characters who are up to no good all the time. But we know we're more than that, and our stories are more complex than that. So today, Denise Lopes, Michelle Osborne, Erica Shaw, and Dion Walcott are joining me to share their experiences and tell their stories of Blackness. We're using the Nguzo Zaba principle of Kuumba to guide our discussion. Kuumba means creativity, to always do as much as we can in the way we can to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than we inherited it. So hi everyone, hi to our panelists. Thank you for agreeing to join me today. Let's start with introducing ourselves. Dion, I'll kick it off to you.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Dion Walcott, the founder of Marked, which is a platform and a creative agency that helps creatives and artists showcase their talent. What we do is we create a lot of events, workshops, and boot camps with the intention of giving artists either a career opportunity or free access to education.
Thank you so much. Denise, if you could introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Denise Lopes. I work at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus. I've been working there for 20 years, and I currently am the Access Programs Coordinator, but I have a long history of counseling students in the registrar's office. I did that for about 15 years. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks, Shalene.
Thank you. Michelle.
Thank you so much. My name is Michelle Osborne. I am a communications and branding professional. I own my own communications and branding studio that focuses on women and non-binary persons from marginalized communities. I'm also creative director of Project Femme Noire, which is a photo series that highlights Black women living in Quebec City. And I'm a content creator, and I am so happy to be here with everybody.
Thank you. And Erica, you're up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Shaw. I am a marketer, manager, content producer, voiceover artist. I am many things. I currently work at Sheridan College as a professor of creativity and change leadership, and I teach the principles of creative problem solving. And I'm also have a dual role there where I am a marketing manager in the communications department. I have a long history in the film and television industry, and I've learned just to use all of my skills to build the career that I have. And I'm excited to be here to speak with all of you today.
Thank you, everyone. This is going to be a great conversation because we have some great panelists here. So I want to start off with asking the question, what's your story? How did you get to this point in your life, your career, your journey? And why do you think it's important for you as a Black person to share your story with others? So anyone can jump in and just start talking.
Well, I guess I can start.
Sure.
For me, I think there's a cross section as to how I came to where I am. I'm a cancer survivor. I survived cancer twice, so that kind of puts things in a totally different perspective in your life. Life is short. Why are you wasting time? You really need to be more of your authentic self all the time. And at the same time, I kind of reached this point in my career earlier on where I felt like I was not able to really be my authentic self at work. People were not listening to my suggestions. I was representing a community that wasn't allowing me to represent them at the university. And I finally just reached the point where I was like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm just gonna start saying whatever the hell I want, what's important, and whoever doesn't want to hear it is gonna hear it. And that kind of led me to where I am now.
Awesome. Who wants to share next?
I can follow up on that theme of heading into the education space. My path to getting to where I am was a lot of bumps in the road, a lot of weaving, and no real clear direction. I think back to when I was thinking about going to university. I approached my parents, my West Indian parents, and said to them, I'm applying to Juilliard and I'm going to be an actor. And my mother looked at me and said, you're going to apply to McGill or Concordia and you're going into journalism. And so that very narrow view of what success means or what paths we can take was very much influential in my life. What ended up happening, I ended up applying to Ryerson, got into the film and television program there, and really bobbed and weaved my way through various roles in the industry. And I give credit to the Black women who were founders in the Canadian film and television industry who gave me my chance. Because I was new to Ontario, I had to work. So I wasn't interning at Much Music or doing things that my other peers were doing to advance my career. And if it wasn't for those people giving me a chance, I wouldn't have had the knowledge of what you can do in this industry. You can be a marketer, you can be a copywriter, you could be an agent, you could work for an agency. No one really explained that to me throughout even my post-secondary career. And so from there, I got a corporate job at Alliance Atlantis at the time, so working in a major film TV corporation. And then from there, I, like Denise, had my voice silenced in many different ways, or felt like it was being silenced. And went off to do my master's, so always excelling in my education, came back, and somehow I wasn't playing in the playground the way I thought I was, and felt that it was time for me to go. And so when the opportunity to move more into the education space became available, I applied and got a job as the marketing manager at Sheridan. That's not to say that it's without its challenges. And even in 2022, where there seems to be this openness of diversity and this desire to hear multiple experiences and voices, I recognize that there's still a lot of barriers. And I'm not clear on what those barriers are, because I've operated in this world of, my immigrant parents coming to Canada, working hard, getting a really good education, going to a semi-private high school, being labeled as a gifted child, all the things that, appears to be excellence and the things that our society tells us makes up for a good citizen. And yet, 25 years into my career, I still feel that I struggle in those corporate environments. So my list of other things that I do really feeds into my creativity, my passions, so that when I do face some of those challenges, maybe in the corporate world, I have an outlet. I have an outlet that allows me to grow and build. So Black excellence is so much, and I know we're going to talk more about it, so I want to open the floor to the other people on the panel. But I mean, it means really living out what your true passion is. And sometimes it takes us 30 years to get an understanding of what that is, just because we don't have an awareness and knowledge of what is out there and what's available to us. I think the next generation might be a little bit more fortunate, because they might they might be able to take those risks a little bit more than we had in terms of the path, but I still do feel that there are barriers out there that we need to address. So that's my story.
Thank you. And for real, there's a theme that I hear when I talk to different people about feeling silenced, not feeling like you can share your voice. And it's frustrating. It's so frustrating that, your voice doesn't have as much weight, or we feel our voices don't have enough weight. And we've been shown that, so we can't express ourselves, but, sometimes we have to make our own spaces to do that. So Michelle, do you have, want to share your story?
Yeah, I can share my path.
Yeah.
Wow, this is so interesting. Wow. I started coming out of high school not knowing what I wanted to do. But, my parents were like, you're going to do something. My parents were actually really open in terms of, we don't care what you do, just make sure you're of value to society. And so I kind of started off my career really quickly as an executive assistant to one of the college directors at Centennial College in Toronto. And it was actually a really great learning experience when you're an administrator, because you get to do so many different things and wear so many different hats. And that helped me to figure out the things that I liked to do and the things that I didn't like to do. Mm-hmm. And so as I went along in my path in my 20s, I realized that I really wanted to be creative. And back then, your teachers, your guidance counselors in high school said, you can be a nurse, you can be an accountant, you can be this. And, you had 5 things that you could be. And now there's so many different things, especially creative things, that these young people get to explore, which I'm totally jealous about. But back then there was only a few things. So when I discovered that I wanted to be a creative person, I started choosing jobs or administrative roles in those industries that were creative. And there was a point in my late 20s, my early 30s, I can't remember, that Sirius XM Radio reached out to me and said, Michelle, we would love for you to help us open in Canada and be a part of our marketing team. And that was the jumpstart of me saying, yes, this is exactly where I want to be. I had a lot of fun, but even in that role, I knew that I was only going to be what I was going to be there, because I didn't look the part. I wasn't the part. And no matter how much I suggested ideas or had an influence on a certain project or whatever, I still was not going to be a part of, in marketing management, communications management, because we already have people who look the part in that. So I ended up moving on, and because a lot of my roles in executive assistant were, presidents, the premier, doing a lot of media stuff for the premier. They liked having the Black girl be the assistant. Okay. They didn't, you're really great at this, Michelle, but we like you hand-holding us because you're just so good at being the assistant. And it was a first Black woman who gave me my opportunity to say, you can do much more than what you're doing. And that's what led me to managing a women's health center in Toronto that only caters to Black women, the only one in North America. That's what led me to working for the president, who was a woman of public health and safety in Canada, and she gave me RI role. So it was always women who said, you can do much more, and we're going to give you this opportunity. And then, as I went through that journey, I still wasn't feeling fulfilled. My marriage ended up breaking up near the end of my 30s. And I decided going into my 40s that I was no longer going to be silenced. I was going to live my authentic life. I ended up meeting someone while on vacation. This person lived in Quebec City. I ended up moving to Quebec City. I had no idea how to speak French. So I went back to school. I learned how to speak another language. I tried to figure out, my place here, because Quebec City is not multicultural at all. And then I just started a new career. I said, you know what? The world is virtual now. So I'm going to do exactly what I've always wanted to do. So I'm going to give myself the chance to be my own creative director, my own communications professional. And once I started using my voice and stopped waiting for people to give me opportunities, and I started giving myself my own opportunities, then people started to listen. Then people started to work with me. Then Quebec City was like, who is this Black bald girl in Quebec City? Where did she come from? And this is when I started Project Femme Noir, highlighting Black women in Quebec City, because Quebec City doesn't highlight people of color. So they were just floored by this Anglophone, queer Black woman who came in and shifted everything. And so this is how it led me to building my own communication studio, which has been very successful in the last year. And I just feel so grateful for this opportunity to have the courage to have left a life that if I did not leave, I would still be doing the same things in Toronto if I didn't have the courage to pack up and restart my journey at the age of 40.
Wow. That's awesome. I wondered when I heard that you were based in Quebec City, I'm like, how did she get to Quebec City?
Love on vacation. And I had a child at 42. So, and I never thought I was going to have children. So everything was just, and now I'm 47 and I am just getting started.
Yes. Wow. All right.
That's an amazing story. I guess I'll go last. So I think it's important for me to share a story just because it's been quite the journey with a lot of different pivots. I've worked in the sneaker industry for almost 12 years now, but would have never thought I would be ever able to work in the sneaker industry because I didn't even know what it was. When I went to school, I'll start from high school / into university. I went to school to major in basketball. That's the way I tell the story, where I was just really more of an athlete. I didn't really take school serious. So I was just going to school basically so I could play. After my first year, I got kicked out of university because I never went to class. I was always in the gym. Then it forced me to actually take school serious and start to think about since I'm here, maybe I should learn something. And that was the first time where I started to explore how I can use my brain to learn things other than basketball. That year off really opened up my brain. Then when I went back to playing, I started to like athletics and education at the same time. What a lot of people don't realize is when you're playing sports, there's heavy camps that happen in the summertime. So you're usually around kids probably for 2.5 months in the summer, which is really babysitting camp. People don't realize that because parents just park their kids with athletes and they peace out for the day. I say that to say, because when I finished university, I went on to become a social worker. And the reason I became a social worker is very much because I was around kids for 4 summers, dealing with problems every single day. And it was just a natural progression for me. It became super easy because I was like, that problem looks super easy because it sounds like the problems I used to deal with when I used to have to manage these kids during summer camp. While I was in social work, I had 2 different roles. I did first generation, kids going to George Brown College for the first time in their family. And my job was helping them manage the school because they've never been there before. And then I got really passionate about the work and then decided to go back down into the high school system because I seen here's all the problems when they get here. So maybe I should go back into the high school system and try to fix the problems so when they get here, they're in better shape. My goal was at the time to just do it for 4 years. And I wanted to do it with a set of kids from grade 9 and see them go through grade 12. And then I told myself I was going to be out of the industry. It took 5 years because a couple of kids got in trouble with the law and, we had to kind of figure it out. Which led me to kind of what I call the biggest pivotal moment in my career. When those 5 specific kids took longer to graduate, I promised them if they graduate, I'll take them to New York City for back to school sneaker shopping. They graduated, we took them to New York. It was an amazing time. On the way back from New York, as much as cool as I thought I was, I started to think in my head, how did I get 5 kids from a priority neighborhood to get in a car, drive all the way to New York City and have trust in me. And then I realized it wasn't actually me, it was sneakers that made them take the risk. And that's how much power sneakers had. So by the time I got back to Toronto, my creative brain started to kick in and I developed a sneaker mentorship program. At that time I was a collector, so I'd bring my collection to high schools and they would give me the so-called troublemakers. I'm also trained in life skills. So we would do sneaker talk, and then behind the sneaker talk, I would teach them life skills. For example, something like, you like Jordans, they cost $300. How do you plan on affording Jordans for the rest of your life? So it transitioned from like Jordan talk to now real talk. That went really, really well, where I have started to make more money doing sneaker mentorship programs than my social work career. Then the Bata Shoe Museum had reached out to me because they heard about all of these sneaker mentorship programs that I was doing in different high schools, and they were getting ready to put together a sneaker exhibition that told the story of like sneakers all together. So they approached me to develop all the programming that was going to go alongside the exhibition. The caveat was that they wanted me to also do partnerships, and at that time I've never did a partnership in my life, but I decided to take the role anyway and learn on the job. And that point to me was super important because I'm just a kid from a priority neighborhood myself. B, sneakers drove me there. C, now I'm about to step into an elite institution. And that was the first time I ever experienced being around elitists. So here's a kid who just loves sneakers, thinks I have my dream job, but now I'm actually like in the shits with people who actually don't want me there. They just want to use my Blackness so they could sell tickets for people to come into the building. Needless to say, there was probably, a few times where I just wanted to blow the whole building up. And I decided not to. I think it's super important for people to hear this because there was a lot of times where I just felt like telling everyone to F off. And then I made a decision where one thing they wouldn't be able to take away from me was me finishing the contract. So I decided, as much as it was painful, I was going to see it through to the end. And then once I finished, my whole mindset was, now that you can't take away this experience from me, when I get into the world, you have to actually support me because you can't say I didn't do it. There was a program at the time, it was called the Sneaker Design Project, which I designed for them. When the idea behind that was give everyone an all-white pair of sneakers. You have 20 minutes, you come up with a design, it's kind of social. It was a way to drive different walks of life to the museum. That program now, I kind of extracted it, and now that's what's called Marked, and I turned it into its own brand. And I took the same idea of like, how do we use this program to drive people to the museum? And instead of just looking at it as a museum, I started selling it through to universities and high schools. So the same way athletes would go to like a university for a basketball tournament, I started selling it to like, my first school was OCAD, where I say to OCAD, kids don't want to come to your university no more for a boring tour and walk around and be like, oh, here's the washroom. Like, no one cares about that. So what we did is we put together an art on sneaker tournament where we would invite all these creative kids to come to the school with the same principles of like, here's a white sneaker, you have 20 minutes, you have your team, there's 10 different schools that come in, it's like a challenge for the day. That caught on fire. So then all different universities started using it as a recruitment tool to bring people in, and an outreach tool. Then what ended up happening, now I'm in the education space and I'm solving problems for outreach and bringing people of color to schools that never thought they would come to the school. So then when that happened, there was a gentleman by the name of Rob who runs something called Yellow Brick, which is an American company, which is an online platform for education that had a sneaker program. And he was struggling with programs and partnerships similar to the Bata Shoe Museum. So he approached me and he said, I've been watching what you've been doing for the last little while. I need someone to join my team that can focus just on partnerships for our sneaker program. He sponsored me to come to the US. We had an amazing relationship for the last, 4 years, where we made a lot of great things happen together. Then I decided, you know what, I want to jump out and do my own thing and keep them more as just a strategic partner. And now I'm working with all the different brands, different schools, and different companies as a platform in and of itself that helps Black creatives get opportunities. That's my story. It's kind of crazy because for me, I wouldn't even know these jobs existed. And that's why I'm super passionate about it, because I feel like as someone who supports creatives, that's a job in itself. But then B, the creative people actually don't have a roadmap on, like, if I wanted to do something for Nike, how would I do that? And that's not taught in school. Like, high school doesn't give you that template at all. So the new form of education, in my opinion, is, especially for people of color, is people of color who are in the industry who can share their story, because the story is the education. So that's why I think it's super important to share our stories, because like without sharing our stories, we don't even know where certain opportunities are.
See, the one thing that people can't say about Black people is that we are not innovative. We're not amazing, because I hear all of the stories that you all are telling me about, how you got to your place in where you are right now. And they're amazing stories of, strength and innovation and just, being creative and doing your own thing and not waiting for somebody else to open that door for you. Like, just saying, you know what, I see that there's a space and I want to fill it. It's amazing. Go ahead, Erica.
Can I just jump in? I got to say, Dion, as you're sharing that story, I'm breathing heavily, right? I mean, each of us talked very high level about some of the struggles, but I could relate. As you're talking, I'm thinking about this situation that happened at this corporate job and how this, and what I think is really what connects us sometimes deeply as Black people in this country especially, is our struggles are not, I didn't get that promotion, I didn't get that 5% bonus, right? Our struggles are things that really can, if we let it, chip away at our being. And everything you mentioned, Michelle, you mentioned it, Denise, you mentioned it, is about taking our own power and saying, I'm not gonna let that external thing defeat me and not allow me to be my true self and excel. And then you just, like, in just this short time that you described your story, I saw so many opportunities for you to be like, F this, walking out. I'm going to get a job at Costco. I'm just going to, I'm going to hustle and just do my thing. And yet you were so driven and so moved every single time, not only to push yourself beyond what others may have thought of you, but also to give back, also to bring your community with you. And hearing that, just like, I'm sure you're feeling it through the screen. Like, I'm like, I've got chills, because again, we're not necessarily in positions of authority and power in the way that some of us can make some decisions like that. But for you to break out on your own, Michelle, you're doing your thing. You're bringing creatives together. I mean, this is empowering. This is Black excellence. And it warms my heart. It warms my heart.
And I think what you said is super important for people to hear as well, is like, I made the choice, because please believe me, like, even today, like there's not today, personally today, but like yesterday, I felt like saying F this shit. Because like, that's part of it. Like I tell creatives and people all the time, it's like, no, it's okay to say F this. It's just don't do it. It's just part of it though. Like you get so frustrated because, if I'm being totally frank, it's like, I get tired of always having to chase and ask somebody for permission, or please, can you do it this way? And the majority of the time, it's people who don't understand the culture that I'm trying to support, but they're in leadership positions and what I call PowerPoint presenter professionals. So like, they're very good at putting together a great PowerPoint. That's actually our culture, but they don't know what they're talking about. So that's the challenging part, because it's like, I actually know what I'm talking about, but maybe I'm not that good at putting together a deck,
For real. And I wanted to ask you, ask all of you. So, we talked about, looking at the community, finding ways to, work with Black creatives, work with Black people, work with the community. Is that an important piece of what you're doing? Is that part of the reason why you're doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in and say for sure, for me, like, because I didn't have those supports, right? Like I had to actually go and find them on my own. But sometimes the supports that I found were being protective because they were used to someone looking for the support from them. So I'm really passionate about, like, you know, lifting someone up to come upstairs with me, because it gets lonely sometimes, you know?
Yeah, you know, and I really resonate with that, because when I got my first big opportunity from a Black woman, and when I started to work with my own community in this big role, I knew that there was no turning back. I knew that the direction that I had to go into my life, and that my purpose was making sure that I was going to support and uplift my community. And looking back, you know, my dad did that growing up, and I didn't, and you know, as an adult now, I'm just realizing in the last few years, I'm like, this is what my dad was doing his whole life. But really, you know, even my communications business now, it is directed to women and non-binary persons from marginalized communities. And the amount of people that said, Michelle, that is too niche. It is never going to work. And I said, you know what? The white guy will be all right. He's got a lot of clients. There are so many that are going to go to him. But my community needs someone who understands them, that they can connect with, that they can be open with their stories. But if they go to the white guy and tell their story, he's going to be like, okay, so we're going to do this. But he has no clue what you deal with. And so my agency has been so successful because I think now we're in a time where people want connection. They just want to see real people, and they want to connect with people who think like them, who need support, who want to be uplifted, who don't want competition. And so I know for me that my agency, I didn't build my agency to make money. I'd be stupid to say that I'm going to be a millionaire. What I want to do is to be able to pay my bills, go on vacation, and serve my community. That's it. That's all.
Well, can I just say, everything I do now, everything I do in my personal and professional life is because I am a Black woman. So it's not just for me, but it's for my kids, it's for my community, it's for all the other kids who didn't know there were these types of opportunities out there, or that I as a Black person could excel to this level, or work in this career area I never thought of. Because I've always known, yes, I'm light-skinned, but I've always known I'm a Black girl, I'm a Black woman, but I didn't really understand what that meant until maybe my late 20s, early 30s, when I was raising my kids. And I was like, just watching them go through lived experiences as a Black person growing up in Toronto. Of course, I come from an immigrant family as well. They were too busy trying to just put a roof over our heads and you know, food on the table to talk about the Black experience, the immigrant experience. Maybe they didn't even have the language for it, but I wanted to make sure my kids understood that, walking through this world as a Black woman and as a Black man, what that means. And everything you do, for me, everything I do is not just about me. It's about, as you all mentioned, pulling everybody up behind me, opening that door for others. And all of the stories I'm hearing here today, I feel it. I feel it, and it, you know, it resonates with me because I live this, and so do all of you every day. So
something that I would add to that is, you know, I've had a couple of moments in my career where people have told me, why aren't you a director by now? Why aren't you this by now? And recognizing the barriers that were there, it's only recent. I will say in the last 3 years have I recognized, oh, that's a barrier. That's not me. That's that system that's not allowing me to thrive. And what I've made a conscious decision to do is do my job, but do other things. And I really, really take pride in mentoring people, I take pride, and it really is important for me to share knowledge to people. And it's in any area. It doesn't have to do with film and television. It could be in finance. It could be in real estate, understanding the importance of owning property. Like, yeah, you want to get, you want to live a certain life, but you also want to be able to access cheap collateral and cheap money so that you can make investments and other things. Like, sharing whatever knowledge I have is really important, because as I said in my story, is that I went through this weaving path. I'm still going through this weaving path of piecing things together. And if I can make something a little bit easier for somebody else, I want that to happen. The other thing I would say, I think both Dion and Michelle mentioned it, is the performance, the posturing that a lot of people do so well. I had gotten to a point 3 years ago that I said to somebody, just give me the rule book. Just give me the rule book. I'll read it. I'll study it. I'll know how to navigate the system. And it's a really good friend of mine said, you don't want the rule book, Erica, because the rule book is always changing. It always changes, and you're not at the table to understand what that change is. That is not your culture. That is not your authority. You will not have access to that because it's always changing, right? The language changes. I work in communication, so understanding how messages are crafted to make you do a certain thing. And as a marketer, I do that too. We're going to use this word to get a call to action. We're going to do this. We're going to have this thing in the video so that it gets their eye and attention. These are all very strategic things that will help move people into a certain direction. But there's also that strategy, whether conscious or unconscious, that holds people back. And I think that's why it's so important for us to build communities, strengthen numbers, network. I didn't understand what networking mean. I was like, no, I need to go home. I need to get my sleep. I need to pay my bills. Like, I don't have time to go to the bar and to this and to that. And that's not the way I've been trained to socialize. And yet there's a value and importance to that. And whether it's with other communities, I think it's especially important for us to network amongst ourselves and build each other up. And I always tell my mentees, my network is your network. As long as I can see that you're on a path, that you're not just gonna, sit and put your feet up, I will give you any contact that I have. And that could be the president of a company to, the VP somewhere that you might want to work. So I think it's especially important, especially as we who are going into maybe our mid portions of our careers and have had some of those valuable experiences. I think it's really important to share that information with people. And I'm learning from all of you here. I'm still learning about what we need to do in order to gain that success. And I think it's valuable, really valuable.
I think that's why it's so important that we share stories with each other. I mean, we talk amongst ourselves with our little groups of friends and stuff. We talk about our struggles and whatever, but it's so important to share, I think, on larger scales for people who may not have those networks, people who might be a little bit further along in their careers, like you're saying, right? Some younger people might be, looking for some kind of guidance or something, looking for, someone to say, yeah, I understand what you're going through. This is what happened to me and this is how I managed. So, it's so important for us to continue telling our stories and to change the narrative of what Blackness means, not so much for other communities, I think, but I think more so for our Black communities, for our Black young people who are looking at life and looking at this world and saying, okay, so where do I fit in? How do I make these moves? How do I do this? How do I do that? This is what we're here for, to, lift up our communities and connect and network and build stronger communities. So Erica had mentioned early on that, we're going to be talking about excellence and what that looks like and what that means. And I wanted to talk to you about that. I want to have a little conversation about that because we have such narrow views in our community about what success is, what excellence is. So what does success and what does excellence mean for each of you? And why do you think that way?
I think that's that's a heavyweight question. I think Success and excellence, first of all, I think they've conditioned us to think it needs to be measured by finances. So first, like I say, I erase that first and foremost off of the table, because if that's your North Star, you'll never reach it. Or you'll never be happy, I should say, because like you could have thousands of dollars and millions of dollars, and it's never ending. Black excellence is actually figuring out how you're going to continue to learn and overcome struggle throughout the journey, in my opinion, because that's where we usually stop. You know, at the first point of I use my own example. Like when I was at the Battle Shoe Museum, that was a very tough 3 years for me, right? And I made the conscious choice of like, no matter what happens here, I'm just going to finish the contract. Where I could have seen a lot of people come and go and say, F this, I'm out of here. And then they go back to, and there's nothing wrong with working a normal job, but going back to the grind or going back to working at Starbucks or however else they want to survive. But as Black people, I feel like we've perfected survival. Like we know how to survive. There's nothing we can't survive. But in order for us to actually springboard into a whole nother level, the skill set we need to actually start to learn is survival is now the ground. Like I don't do the ground anymore. So how do we start to actually empower ourselves to think of it as like, I don't call it excellence, I call it extraordinary, because everyone else is ordinary. So if I want to play in the space of rare, then I got to do rare shit. And rare shit means, you know what, sometimes I don't want to actually be here, but I'm going to do the work. So I feel like understanding your journey and how when there becomes little pitfalls and pain points on how to push through, that's the journey to excellence to me. The outcome can be a lot of different outcomes, because I think we focus a lot on the checkered line. When you see a lot of people run through the line, you're like, oh my God, it's amazing. You know, they're doing so well, but no one actually studies like, you know, the bumps and the bends and how they overcame that to get through the checkered line. And that portion of the journey is where the excellence is to me.
Yeah, for me, I think Black excellence means, and I've been thinking about this question, really being committed to your goals and being unapologetic about it, being authentic with it. Because one thing I learned in my career is that it's not the person who's the best at what they do that succeeds. It's consistency. Are you consistent? Are you doing a little bit of something every day to make sure that you are doing what you really want to do? You know, I've worked with many people who are way smarter than me, that way creative than me, but because they gave up early on and I'm still here pushing, they are not where they want to be. So if I can send any message to anybody who is struggling and just like, oh, you know, I'm not still where I want to be. And usually in your 20s, right? 20s suck, right? Because you're always trying to prove yourself and you're afraid of judgment and right? You're like, it's the time of self-discovery. So if there's any young people who are watching this, I want to say one of the best things that someone told me in my career is do things that other people don't want to do, even if you don't want to do them either. Because then when it's time for your promotion, then when it's time to give you a project, they're going to say, Michelle was doing this. Let's get her to come and do this project. Where nobody I don't want to do that project. But guess what? I might have been cussing in the background that why am I doing this? But I just add it to my resume. Ding. So when the next opportunity comes, oh, well, Michelle did this. I want to really tell people there is no timeline to your success. There just isn't, because life isn't linear. Life is going to take you on all different paths and you're going to feel like you're a failure, but you need to be able to trust the process and be consistent. Have peace of mind in knowing that you're exactly where you're supposed to be and be happy with who you are. And to me, that's what Black excellence is.
I just want to comment on something real quick. Like that feeling that you speak about, I think it's important for people to know, like especially people of color, Black people, that's part of it. Like feeling that shitty feeling, that's actually part of it. Like you can't not do that and be excellent. Like it's part of it, right? So I think that's important for people to understand. Like feeling the shits is part of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think success looks like this,
No.
when actually success looks like this. And you're gonna fail more times than you're gonna succeed.
Right.
So if you can't deal with the failure, if that's something to you that every time you're like, you have to go back to plan B and plan C, your life is gonna be, okay, what's plan F? Okay, what's plan J? Okay, that is something that people need to expect. I think social media has done such a good job of making success look easy, right? Everyone's got an Amazon page and this page, and we're all doing this. But really, success is more this than it is this. And if you can accept that and recognize it and be consistent, you're gonna be all right.
So true, so true.
I think for me, when we talk about excellence, it's very personal. It's not, have I made it to the position of a director? That's really not, yes, of course, it's important to be at those tables where we're actually making decisions that impact others' lives, of course. But for me, I really think about what difference did I make for my family and for my community? What legacy am I leaving behind in that regard? So like, for example, when I, publish these children's books and they celebrate diversity, for me, that's the difference that I'm making. I'm introducing more books for children that look like us, where they can see themselves in the pages and they're the main characters and they're positive characters and they're beautiful and they're, different complexions, different hair textures. That for me is a huge difference. It's a legacy I'm leaving my children and my community. When I talk about even the job that I do, I stayed in a position where I was almost entry level for 15 years because I work at a university where for almost 15 years, I was the only person of color seeing students. That's outrageous. And I felt a responsibility to those students. When they come back and tell me stories later on about how they were at a point where they thought they couldn't even finish their first year, they weren't going to be able to make it through university. And then they reach out to me and tell me I made a difference and I helped them graduate. Like that's huge. That's the kind of legacy I'm leaving behind. And for me, that's my version of excellence.
100.
I don't think I have anything else to add. I mean, our campus, no, really. I mean, Black excellence is, it's all these beautiful faces right here. That's Black excellence. It's, it's not the number that's in your bank account, as Dion mentioned. And Michelle, in my course in creative problem solving, I teach about, success and failure and our ideas of that. And you're absolutely right. The diagram that I put up has a linear line. Success, often people think it's like this, and really it's a bunch of squiggly lines of you just going back and forth, and the dips and the valleys to get to that point. I think, and you also mentioned being authentic to yourself. I mean, I'm so passionate about creativity and demystifying the fact that people think creativity is about the arts. No, when you listen to Dion's story and the details of that, how he managed to pull things together, and he's in the space of social work, he's in the space of education, he's now partnering with corporate organizations. That's our creativity lived out in so many different ways, which builds our success, right? And I support exactly what Denise said. In attaining that success, making sure that we are impacting our community, that's important to me, right? Can't have the success, live in the mansion by yourself and think, I made it, yeah. And then brothers and sisters are behind just trying to piece two grains of rice together. It doesn't work. Doesn't work for me. Doesn't work for me. And it hasn't worked for me in terms of getting to my place of success where I am now. It's always been on the shoulders with the hand holding of somebody else. And oftentimes it was one of my Black brothers or Black sisters that really helped get me through. Really get me through. I'll just say one quick thing. It's kind of an aside, but I remember going through a really, really devastating situation in my first corporate job, like really devastating. that it was to the point where I was really down and had thoughts of suicide. And I remember going to a party, a party by a Black restaurateur in Toronto. And I just happened to mention just a portion of that story to somebody who was at the party. I didn't know her very well, but I just knew she was in the film and television industry. And she said, "Don't you know the same thing happened to so-and-so at the CBC?" And I was like, what? And she was able to give me the tools and the language that I needed to get me out of that situation. Why do I mention that? My success, my being here today is because of somebody else, and me being able to have the vulnerability to share even that small thing, and her having the know-how to say, "No, girl, you're not crazy. You're not, this is our truth. And here I'm going to put you in touch with this person to help you get through the situation," which ended up being another Black person, a Black lawyer who helped me get through that situation. So I just reiterate the fact that the success, it's not singular as well. It's not beholden to just one person. At least mine definitely isn't. And it sounds like many others on this panel as well.
I feel like just on the topic of excellence too, something that's important is, I know we talked a little bit about Instagram and social, and like you see the end product before you actually see the work. I think especially people trying to figure out what excellence means to them is like, figure out what you're actually passionate about and perfect that. From the basketball side, I'm like, I always tell this joke to creatives, like, everyone wants to be, Michael Jordan, but no one wants to be Dennis Rodman, where it's like, there's so much other opportunities, but everyone wants to be in the shine. But like, maybe you're not the person to be in the shine. Maybe, you're going to be the best rebounder ever, and you're just going to work on that craft and you're going to be excellent at that, versus like the lights, because that's what, they condition us to believe that, in order to be successful or excellent, you need to be in this big granular light. Everyone needs to know your name, when that's not necessarily the truth, But there's actually way more opportunities of being excellent and living a healthier life that are not in the light at all. So I think that's something that's super important, like perfect your craft and be happy with what you're good at, and don't worry about what's happening to the left or the up, back, forth in front of you. Just do your own thing and get really good at it and spend the time perfecting your shit.
Yeah, and I wanted to really quickly touch on what Erica has been saying, because she mentioned a couple of times about sharing the knowledge, not keeping it for yourself, because we're in a day where, people don't want to say where they got their information, where they got this, where they got that, for fear that somebody's going to take that and be more successful for them, right? It's that competition thing. But guess what? Nobody can do you like you do you. So take this information, go over there and go to this print, go to this graphic designer, go to this photographer. Yes, he's really great. Go use him, but nobody can do you like you. So for me, when I was younger, I thought it was all about competition. But as I've gotten older, in the last decade, more specifically, I'm all about collaboration. But because we are both in communications, or we're both in marketing, still nobody is going to do me like me, period. There's room for everybody.
It's very, very true. There's room for everyone. There's enough for everyone to eat. No one needs to starve, right? We touched on this a little bit. We talked about failure and how success isn't like a straight shot up, but there's ups and downs. And I know for myself, many times I would beat myself up when something didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. I'd be upset, I'd be angry. And my sister-in-law said to me once, you need to give yourself the grace to allow yourself to fail. Because if you don't fail, you're not going to learn. But it is harder, I find, for Black people to embrace that, because the fear of failure means that, will they never hire me again? Will I never get the opportunity again? Do any of you have any thoughts about that? Like giving yourself the grace to fail in the society that we live in, where, Black people are not always given the benefit of the doubt.
But by way of example about failure, what is his first name? Sir James Dyson, who created the Dyson vacuum, created 1,500 prototypes before putting it on the market. Now, one might say he failed 1,500 times before he got one product to then make a multi-billion-dollar company. We need to take from those examples that it is failure that gets us our success. In Silicon Valley, they actually welcome people putting together not only a professional resume, but what's your failure resume? How many apps have you failed to launch? Because they need to recognize that you're going to fail fast and be able to improve on that. So we might need to shift our idea of what failure is, because it's actually the recipe for success. And it's been proven over and over and over again. And so I do understand what your sister-in-law may have shared with you in terms of allowing yourself the grace, because there are additional pressures I know that we place on ourselves, and that are placed on us to have this air of success, like air of perfection. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, failure is the recipe for success, like no doubts. And in one of my classes, I actually share with my students what I deem to be my failure resume, only to look back and go, that wasn't a failure. Might have been a missed opportunity, but it wasn't a failure. And where I may have thought that I failed, I've actually rebounded and done better. So yeah, that is really, really important. But also I think part of it too is one of the reasons why we should be sharing our story. Our stories of failures can be perceived as a success to somebody else and might help somebody in their journey.
Can I just say also, I mean, we all know there's this, as Erica mentioned, this additional pressure, expectations of us, and we have to be 10 times better to be half as successful. But what do we tell our kids? We tell our kids all the time, it's okay for you to fail. It's okay that you didn't meet this standard or meet this level, because it's an opportunity to learn and grow from that. But when we become adults and we get into the work world and the real world, we are so hard on ourselves when we quote unquote fail. But really, as Erica also mentioned, it's an opportunity to learn, but it's a pivot point. So you failed at this. What does that mean? And it's a time for us to take a step back and reevaluate. Okay, maybe I was doing it the way that they expected me to do this, because this has been the standard. But people are so sick of hearing me say this. I say it all the time. As a Black woman, maybe I don't have to do it that way. I do it the way I know that I want to do it, and I'm going to be successful at doing it. And if they don't like the way I do it, that's their problem, not mine. So I think we, as you know, your sister-in-law mentioned, we have to give ourselves that grace, because it actually is a pivot point for us.
One of my mentors a long time ago really put into my head, like, let failure is okay, but it's really about the recovery. So I really don't focus so much on the failure. I focus more on, like, how can I recover fast? Because you're going to fail no matter what. It's how long you're going to sit into, like, oh, I ain't that good, or, oh, I shouldn't do this no more. And because that's actually a natural feeling as well. So there's no way around that. Like, when you fail, you're going to feel shitty. It is what it is. But how quickly could you get back up and get back to the game is what I try to put the most energy on. So, like, what can I learn quickly and be like, I probably wouldn't do that again. And I actually start to think of failure as funny. Just for in my own brain, how I have to digest it is like, oh man, that was mad funny, Dion, like, you really effed that up. And then it makes it a joke to me, then I don't take it that serious, and I can recover faster. So I look at failures as funny moments, and then I digest it that way in my brain, so my brain doesn't put it in the negative category, and then I can recover a lot faster.
Yeah, I don't even know if I have much to add to this, because you guys said it all. I think failures are future opportunities, really. And just what Dion was saying, one of the things I learned in my career from working from these really influential big people is Stop focusing on the problem and focus on the solution. Okay, this effed up, this didn't work out the way it was supposed to work out. Stop beating yourself up and saying, oh my God, I did that, it didn't work out. No, what's the solution? Let's focus on the solution now. And that made me really recognize that failure wasn't about that one thing that you wanted to happen, it not happening. Failure was just about going to the plan and making sure that you learned the lessons from that and you kept going. You just keep going. You just keep going. And I guess it's easy to say as someone who is an older person now. And when you're younger, like you don't feel it like that. When you're in it, you don't feel it. You just feel the failure. But I think if you really get with people who are mentors like Erica, I think mentorship is amazing. For any young person who's watching this, find yourself a good mentor, and they will talk to you about all the failures that they have been through. But I think it's all about looking at your failure as a future opportunity and recovery. Stop focusing on what happened, focus on how you're gonna fix it. Yep. That's it.
I love what you just said. I co-sign that. I wrote it down. Failure is a future opportunity. I love that. In addition to that, you know what you said just now about you had people who encouraged you to not look at the problem, look at the solution. I think that's really important. You know, Dion mentioned it as well, just like, you know, changing it into the funny. The one thing I would encourage even us to do is to recognize when somebody's telling us about their failure, don't be like, well, I don't know why you did that anyways. You know, we need to find those communities of people who are our cheerleaders. And that's one of the things I say that I am. I will be your biggest cheerleader. I will be the one cheering you on through your success, but also your failure. And I think that's really important. So if, like Michelle urged, anybody who's watching this, if you don't have at least one person who is your cheerleader, find one person who will be your cheerleader, because as you go through those failure moments, it's inevitable. You've heard from at least 5 people on this panel. We've all gone through failure. It's going to happen. But to have a network of people, or at least one person in your corner, it's going to be really, really important to help you even challenge some of the thoughts or the gremlins, as I call it, in your mind, to putting that pressure down on you. So just really important. Yeah, just find that person, find those people, your community who's going to really support you. But let's also support each other, right? Let's not be the crabs in the bucket.
Sure.
So Denise had mentioned something that I had wanted to talk about. So we've all heard you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. So right now we're on Toronto Black Mental Health Week. I think it's a Toronto-based thing. But how does that affect your mental health when you hear, or when you've heard someone tell you or consistently tell you, you know, as Black people, we have to work twice as hard to get half as far? And how do you push back against that? Or do you?
That's what I was thinking. I actually don't push back on it, because I think it's true. I think that, you know, the starting line or the starting mark is behind for us. So it's just a fact. Like, I think the energy needs to go into like giving the knowledge backwards, so like we could slowly move the starting line up for the others that come after us. I don't necessarily think that we could erase that fact that you just said today. I think we're in process right now of like closing the gap. But like earlier, I forgot who said it, but you know, it's like the system wasn't designed for us. So like, how could we be at the same starting point? We're trying to win in a system that wasn't designed for us to win. So what we're now trying to do is design our own system / build our own table. And in building your own table, it's going to take some time to close the gap. And even when you build your own table, you're going to have to re-educate people how to be at the new table. And so there's still a gap. So I think, you know, the reality is like we're doing this not for the first time, because I think there's a lot of people who've been doing a lot of hard work for a long time, but I think we're closing the gap slowly, so we don't have to continue to say, well, it's not fair because we have to work 20 times harder. I think it's going to slowly be, it is fair, but we're just playing at a different table. And if people want to play at our table, then they got to figure out what race or what system they're going to be playing within.
Yeah,
I think sorry, go ahead, Erica.
No, Denise, go.
I was going to say, I think my answer to this would probably be a combination of some of the things that we talked about. So networking is huge because, yes, a lot of the barriers we face are because of the systems that are currently in place. So I think networking is really important within our own community, building those networks, not being gatekeepers, sharing that information. But also, like when I mentioned before, I didn't understand really the weight and the responsibility of being a Black woman and what that meant until my late 20s, early 30s. I think I share this a lot with my kids, the younger kids, the kids that I interact with at the university. There is a responsibility because I feel like you're not only looking at a career, thinking about future goals for yourself, but for the people that come behind you, for the community. Like if I want to become, I don't know, a director somewhere, that means that, yes, I'm a director. Yes, I'm able to make those six figures, but it means I'm opening the door for others and I'm moving the goalposts. So I'm kind of breaking down some of those barriers so that, those others coming up behind me don't have to work 10 times as hard to be half as successful, if that makes sense. It's a responsibility in the community. And I personally really try and express that to the younger kids, because you're not thinking like that at 17 and 20 and 25. You're thinking about yourself and your own goals. But I think there's a bigger picture here. And I have so much faith in the next generation coming up behind us. I see how their thinking is much more evolved and much more advanced than I was at that age. And it really gives me a lot of hope. So that's kind of where I put a lot of my energy.
Mm-hmm. I, going back to your question, I don't push back. I don't push back because exactly to what Dion said, right? The reality of it is we're starting a further behind the line. I think, though, if I can offer something of a different point of view, two things. One, I think it is important for us to recognize how it does affect us mentally. The stress that I know I have put on myself in the past to attain that level has been hard, emotionally, physically, and all those things that manifest physically are coming from somewhere. But here's what I would offer, which is also the other challenge. Just like an athlete, you're exercising a muscle and you get really good, right? You're top of your game. Even if you don't get recognized, you're still above the average person who can't even dribble a ball, right? What I would offer, and this has been my experience, is because I have trained myself, I've been trained to excel at this high degree. What I have found is coming into environments where the majority of people are not like that, there's this clash. There's this rub. And that's the next layer of Black excellence that no one tells you about. So when you're in the room and you could come up with the idea, you might not be able to articulate it as beautifully as, Timmy, but you have the idea and you're coming out with it, but you're not being heard. That's the other layer, because you've been doing it so much. You've been problem solving, as Michelle said, for so many years that your problem solving muscles are at rapid speeds, while others are sitting there going, how did she do that? And then there's a struggle there. Oh, well, she always comes up with these ideas, but we don't want her ideas. We're gonna adapt it to what we want, right? And that's another layer of, I think, stress on our own mental wellness and mental health, when we can't be our true authentic selves. As Michelle said, we can't excel in those environments. So I think we have to recognize that, and I don't have an answer to how we get through it outside of building really strong networks and resources where you can go to speak to a therapist if you need to release some of that, and take care of ourselves and our health, eating well, sleeping well, hydrate well, exercise when you can, because I don't think we can, I don't know when there will be a time when we will escape that. I do have hope. I do have hope in the next generation. But one of the reasons why I'm so big on mentorship and telling them is because I don't see it in those environments that it's shifting quickly enough for them to be able to walk in and go, yeah, I'm top of my game, I'm this, that, and they're gonna get the head seat at the table. Do you know what I mean? I'm not seeing it enough. And so it's twofold. I don't push back on it. I give my mentees the reality. It's going to be hard work, and you're probably going to see other people rise faster than you, but that doesn't mean that you're not doing what you need to do. And if at any point you need to take a pause, you need to speak to somebody professionally, do it, because it's the reality of the burdens, the compounded burdens, I think, that we walk through this world, how we walk through this world in these bodies as Black people.
Yeah, I think, again, I agree with everybody here. I think it's important to recognize that it's there. The system was not built for us. It was built for us to not win, actually, right? They keep putting things in there like, we don't want you to win, so we're going to put this in there too. Let's see how they climb, right? And, but I also think that we should not use it as a barrier to our success. And a really great example for me is, when I moved to Quebec City is 99% French speaking. So you literally cannot live here. It's not like Montreal. Everyone thinks Quebec City is like Montreal. It is absolutely not like Montreal. You have to speak French in order to live here. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life? I'm a 40-year-old who doesn't speak French. It's taking me a long time to get this language together. But I came to a point where I was like, I am not going to use this language barrier as a barrier to my success, which means I had to develop my own thing. And sometimes you have to step away from the grain, from the corporate, from climbing all of that with everybody else, and develop your own thing. So then guess what? You don't have to work twice as hard, because you have something that is so unique that nobody can compete against you. So I think it's really important to recognize that it's there, that you're going to have to work, that you're going to have to fight, but not to use that as a barrier to make sure you get to where you want to be.
Thank you, everybody. So I have one more question to ask before we end our discussion. So when we talked about Kuumba at the beginning, we talked about leaving our communities better than how we found them through creativity. How do you think that you're leaving your community better through the creativity that you have?
Well, I think everybody can recognize I'm a bit of a talker at times. Although on any assessment, MBTI, I'm an introvert, believe it or not. But connecting with people, Malcolm Gladwell speaks to this in his book. There are connectors in this world, people who can just, connect one person to the next. And I think I value that. I value just the opportunity to connect people so that they can excel in whatever area they're in. I consider all the different skills that I bring, whether it's my ability to communicate, my ability to bring relationships, my technical skills in audio or video production, content producing, I bring it all together to express myself creatively. I'm not necessarily a fashionista, but there are people who use, fashion as their way of expressing their creativity. Whatever it is, we are all creative. I want to stress that. And I think it's really important that we just, as Dion mentioned, find your passion and live in that. And maybe your passion isn't the thing that's going to make you money. Maybe it's not, but do take the time to express it, knit that thing, learn how to write or learn how to draw, learn a new language, travel, whatever it is, because I think one of the challenges that we might face in our life is that when we stifle that just holds us back. That's what might impact our mental health because we're not living in our true self. So I use everything I can, everything that I have in my being to just connect people or to make connections. And that's how I live out my creativity. And hopefully with all my chat, it's leaving the world in a better place, especially for my Black people, especially for my youth who I mentor. I just hope that it gives them just even that much more of a leg up than they would have had before.
Yeah, I'm like Erica. Everyone thinks I'm an extrovert, but I am totally an introvert. Like, in my business life, I have to speak. And then when I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go home and but the reason why I made my communications business focus on marginalized communities, because I realized that there were so many people who have these great ideas in their communities, but people knew very little about communications and marketing, about how it works, about how storytelling is so powerful, about all of these little things. Like, you can hire an accountant, but if you don't know how to communicate your message, you don't need your accountant because you ain't going to make any money. And I realized how people were spending money on their products and this and this and this, and nobody was spending money on learning how to communicate. And one of the things that I want to really stress for my community, and I want to make sure that they got their ideas out there. And, you had all these white people who had money to be able to hire all these people. When I give my services, I tell people how much I charge and they're like, Michelle, you are not charging enough. And I'm like, I know, but my goal is not to be a millionaire. My goal is to make sure that I help my community. I mean, I still need to pay my bills, but help my community to make sure that their ideas and whatever they want to do, they're able to do it as themselves and without apology. I say that to my clients, that just like, no, nobody wants to see me. They don't know. People want to see you because there are people who look like you and they're waiting for you to talk about and to share your idea. You just don't know how to communicate it. So I think I've just learned from all of these lessons. I've been an HR manager, executive assistant, communications project manager. I've been in so many different areas and environments that I think that I've been able to create, over 25 years of all of those skills and failures into this one business that I've created, so that when I talk to people about communications, it's not just about communications. It's about all of these other nuances that make you unique in who you are and learning how to build your business. And so that's kind of how I think I give back to my community. And I really just want to see us succeed, because they so badly don't want to see us succeed. Nobody cares about us. Black women statistically are the poorest people on the planet. Nobody gives a shit. So if I don't give a shit, who's going to give a shit?
I find it so interesting that everyone on the call, well, not everyone, I mean, so far everyone said they're introverts, because I'm an introvert as well. Like I'm fine not having to speak for the rest of the day, if you ask me. But when I'm passionate about something, I feel like it's my responsibility to share my story and give back. I think I'm leaving the community better just in everything we're building around Marked and creating the platforms and giving artists opportunity to showcase their talent. I always say I feel like I'm working for my 16-year-old self. So that's what motivates me, because when I was 16, I didn't have a 43-year-old Dion that I could pick the brain of like, how could I work in the sneaker industry? I'd be like, people in my neighborhood were like, sneaker industry, what's that? You could go to Foot Locker and buy sneakers, but there's no way you could actually work in that. So like, go to the gym or be a dope boy. So like, there was no space in between. I think now creativity, because of the way the world's structured, like everything's around creativity. Instagram, video, picture taking, all these things breed creativity. So I even give like an example. We recently did a sneaker boot camp in Detroit for 50 kids from an underserved neighborhood. And one of the kids and I have connected, and he was the winner. So like the winner of the boot camp gets their design put on a New Balance t-shirt. Then they get 500 t-shirts to give away to their friends and family as a way to increase the profile of a young designer. New Balance, I shouldn't call them up, but New Balance is taking long to produce the t-shirt. So the kid hits me and he's like, yo, what's going on with the t-shirt? Like I want in December, it's now March, I still haven't got my t-shirt. And I had to explain to him, like, listen, at the end of the day, like you have to also remember, like where I sit, I actually don't work for the brand. So I'm closer to you than you really realize. Like I don't work for New Balance, I don't work for Foot Locker. Like I work for myself. So the same challenges you're actually working through in your mind is the same challenges I'm actually working through right now. I just have a couple more W's than you do. So in reality, like me and you are actually right beside each other. So I wish I could give you all the answers you want and be like, yo, the t-shirt's gonna be done tomorrow. But the truth is, like, I'm knocking on New Balance's door trying to figure it out the same way you trying to figure it out. And you know, you 21. So like, if I want something at 21, there was no Dion that could help me figure it out. So you know what that looked like? Fuck this, I'm done, right? And you go to do something else. So like, you need to learn to be patient and hold tight for a minute. And he actually got that. But like, now times have changed from a community setting. For me, that's why I'm passionate, because at 21, I didn't have a Dion or people from my team that could help him troubleshoot a situation to get his design put on a t-shirt, right? So I think that's the whole idea of what Mark stands for, is giving back to the community and trying to bring our young creatives and young people who want to support creatives up into a whole nother level, not only in the creative space, but like in the business space as well.
And I think for me, I think my biggest contribution, I want it to be my biggest contribution, is that I want people to understand that you don't have to be really afraid to be who you are in the work world, in your workspace. I used to be so angry for so long because I was silenced, and any issues that I brought up around Blackness in the workplace, I was silenced for so long. And I think when it was late 30s, maybe hit 40, I was just like, fuck this. Like, I just don't care anymore. I'm going to bring everything about myself to work. And if that means talking about or sharing the fact that I write Black books, or the fact that I run social media pages, or the fact that I, paint Black and Afrocentric paintings, I'm bringing all those paintings into my workspace, and they're going to be in the background in all my meetings, disrupting all my meetings. I don't care anymore. Putting together EDI workshops, like all of that, bringing all of that into work as who I am, I don't care anymore. And people are just going to have to learn to sit with it. Too bad. And I think for me, I just want that to be my greatest contribution. When people can come to me now, other coworkers, and say, because you did this or you said this in a meeting, I felt empowered to be able to go to my team meeting and say, okay, what are we doing about this Black initiative or this initiative? Or what are we doing to support Black students on campus? Like, for me, that's my greatest contribution. And it gives me the greatest joy, I think. So.
I have a question for you, Denise. Are you an introvert as well?
I'm an introverted extrovert. I love to be social, but I just, as Michelle mentioned, I can feel like my battery level, and people who are closest to me know this. Like, when Denise's battery level is hitting 10%, you just got to let her go off by herself for a few hours and kind of recharge. although the pandemic's really kind of changed this, I'm not sure if I am an extrovert anymore. I started going back to work on campus and I'm like, I don't know if I want to be around all these people. I don't know.
People-y.
Yeah, it's really too people-y. I don't know. I'm kind of figuring it out as I go.
I am an introvert as well, so 4.5 out of 5, I guess.
Yeah. It's funny how that works, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I find the more creative people tend to be more introverted. I guess we spend a lot of time in our heads.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, I wanted to thank all of you for sharing your stories. I think this was a fantastic discussion. I really appreciated that you were so open and transparent about your stories and your thoughts. And I want to thank those who are listening or watching at home or wherever you are. Thank you for joining us in this discussion. And we hope that you have something you could take away from this to, and be empowered or inspired. So thank you again, everybody.